So this all sounded like a huge deja vu to me. I think a lot of us are all, our institutions were involved in the eScience Institute, and we've all been doing pretty much the same things at almost the same time. We've all attended the same conferences. So and it's great to see everybody developing these agendas and coming to terms with teaching data management classes to the disciplines and things like that. But one question that I did have was, yes, as librarians, we all do, libraries do preservation, libraries do metadata, libraries do all these different functions. It's a classic thing that we do. But I, as a reference librarian, really have never done any of these things. They were always handled by other departments. So why, when it comes to eScience, suddenly am I, the science librarian, the person for metadata, the person for, institutional repositories, et cetera?
I guess since I said that, I have to answer.
Sorry?
Thank you. Sorry, since I think you're referring to something I said, right? So about the metadata and all that, so I should probably take a stab at answering this question. That's a good question. I think there are a lot of ways to handle sort of the metadata piece and, the various pieces of the puzzle. I work at a really large library system, and we do have a staff of people who know a lot about metadata. We have a staff of people who know a lot about Python. We have a staff of people. So, that is an option, which is to, every time you have an issue, an eScience issue, to assemble a team, like a medical team, right? When a person has a sort of complicated medical condition, they have several specialists come together and do some sort of a reference interview of sorts, So I think that's definitely a possibility. So, yeah, you don't probably have to learn all those things. You're not obligated. I think there's always that line in everybody's job description, at least I think it's in mine, which is other duties as assigned. So everything always seems to fall under that particular thing. And it depends on, I like sort of this learning new things and that sort of thing, so that appeals to me. But to other people, maybe they're more specialized and sort of want to focus on one thing that wouldn't appeal to them. So I guess my answer to you is, if you want to get involved in those things, then there's an opportunity probably. And if you don't, then there's probably an opportunity for you to take advantage of the people around you who do know those things already. I don't know. Does that help?
This is the classic reason why people look for the exit and slump down in their seats when I start talking, because I don't have training in this either. I'm a reference librarian. I'm a liaison. I've never really worked with data. And so that's a really good question. And how we do it, I agree with Amy that for us, it's basically we have and hope to develop people with specialized skills. Every liaison is not going to know how to do this. Most of us really don't know how. So I think it's a matter of, to some degree, those who are interested take in training and learn what you can, and then over time we'll bring in new staff who have better skills. And for us, it's also a lot of collaboration. So as we look at the best practices in data management instruction, we don't know all the best practices, but we're bringing in people from our Office for Sponsored Programs and UITS who do, and as we work with them, we'll learn more about it.
And I also want to say I think there are going to be huge staffing changes in libraries over the next few years around this issue, because there is going to be expertise that we're aware of, but we haven't been taught. So I keep telling people, as soon as my mom lets me, I'm going to get a tattoo, and it's going to say, "We live in perpetual beta," because that's just what it feels like now.
Actually, can I add to that as well? And then Sally, you're next. In terms of being a liaison, reference liaison, and I am as well, and I think Amy and I have spoken about this, is that we know our faculty, and they all feel very comfortable speaking to us, and they will tell us things and their frustrations that maybe they won't tell their department chair. And so it's a matter of, I think it is a team situation where we can help with that initial outreach and be able to say to the faculty, okay, we know who to go to, and we're working on this, and that's exactly what a liaison does, so that it is a lot of learning very quickly. And again, like Maxine said, we're one step ahead, maybe a step and a half sometimes, and if you really want to do this, that's what you have to do. And hopefully Terry will talk about what the schools are doing next, or hopefully what they'll be doing to get us through this transitional period. But I think being the reference liaison, that's your training right there, to get started. You've got the subject expertise, and you've got that knowledge and the intellect and the people skills that are necessary to do this.
And the connections.
And the connections.
Goodness, getting a workout this morning.
It's well known that libraries have been taking a lead in dealing with e-science, but as this e-science team charge draft nicely shows, there are dozens of other departments in a university or research institute that have to be on the same plate to make this happen and advance the institution in research. And you would think that this all ought to be coordinated by, say, a provost's office or an equivalent. And yet it seems it's very much a grassroots effort. And I'm wondering why it is that a lot of institutions, it's not coming from the top, the leadership. What is it that they're not seeing or prevents them from, having a coordinated strategic plan?
They're not involved in research grants. I think that's part of it. I think libraries got involved first. I mean, I remember just seeing some articles in library journals about this NSF mandate and sort of the data deluge even before that. And so I think librarians were kind of aware of it more even than researchers were initially. And then when the NSF mandate came out, then it hit the researchers, the PIs, and the provosts are just sort of now getting it. So I think it is a grassroots thing, but it's it wasn't started by the grassroots. It sort of came up from from under, even below that.
I have I've been thinking about this a bit over the past year, and I think that for the data, especially storage and that sort of thing, which seems to be what a lot of researchers primarily want, right, is really does need to be a coordinated effort. And to do that, it needs to become part of the infrastructure at the university. And for it to become part of the infrastructure at the university, somebody needs to pay for it. And I think that there is some maybe shying away from. I can't speak because I haven't heard this from anyone, so I don't with that caveat, but I have sort of thought about, I can't speak for everybody's institution, but many institutions have very high indirect costs, for example, that cover, for grant funding, that cover infrastructure, right? So wouldn't it be great if 1.5% of the indirect costs could be devoted to data infrastructure? But universities fight for every percentage that's coming from that, even though it's high, like 70%. So, but I think that maybe there's some money issues behind. I mean, storage is cheap, right? But it isn't free. So
I don't know that any of us would presume to speak for the administrators, because who knows what's in their minds. But I have to go back to the whole collaborative effort. The library's not going to do this by ourselves either. It literally has to be a collaborative effort on campus. As we're sending out the survey, we have the written endorsement not only of our library director, but of the head of our vice president for research, who's the head of our OSP, and also of the head of UITS. So they're all recognizing that it's important, whether or not they themselves are actually participating or organizing it. It is on their radar.
I think that some of this also has to do with the fact that as we have changed from print publication of research to electronic publication of research, in the print publication you were not allowed to publish your data because it made your journal article too unwieldy. And it was easy enough to share through fax or through mail the data to the researchers who wanted it. The electronic revolution has really changed a lot of that, and I think that there's pieces of the university that haven't quite kept up with that yet. and we're generating all of this data now that never used to be valuable to anyone before, and now it's becoming very valuable. And electronic storage that used to be extremely expensive has become less expensive. Still expensive in a lot of cases, but much less expensive than it used to be. And as costs drop, then you will see more emphasis on data sharing and how you're going to preserve all of the data that's behind the research and the publications.
Hello? Okay. Hi. This has been the best panel for me in the last few days. I've noticed that...
We're in good company.
well, I'm not from a university, I'm from the federal government, and we're very involved in a culture change from paper to electronic records. And I notice you don't explicitly mention the records management folks at your university, so I'd love to hear a little bit about that and what their roles are. I know in the archive records management world, we've been very aware of this graying of the skill set, archivists having to become almost IT managers. And I see that people are just starting to get to that point in the library world. So first, I'd love to hear about the role of the records manager in your institution. And also, I'm really fascinated by this best practices. We're kind of doing similar things to get people who are used to the paper world to start thinking about managing their records, electronic information, and responsibly as well. Whoever wants to comment.
Are you talking about like records management, like student records, that area, or are you talking about archival records of the university's history?
Oh, I mean working materials. Research.
Oh, research materials. Oh, okay, so say your question again.
Oh, here you are.
Sorry.
It's on. Unless I misunderstood you, when you said you're going to start instituting best practices for graduate students and for faculty, basically giving them guidelines on how they should be managing their information, managing their research data. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. So I can relate to that, and that we're trying to get people to do similar, sort of manage the way they manage things. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious to know about, have you gotten very far with that?
We're just in the planning stages, but I know at UMass, you guys have been doing it for a while.
We have been doing it for a little while, and I can, in fact, we should probably post our websites and things that might be helpful to the camp guide. And I have to say, we have been active for a while, and we slavishly follow what MIT does, so I think Amy should address it.
Everybody follows MIT.
I'm not sure that's a good idea. So,
go ahead.
am I supposed to respond to the archivist issue? Is that still the main question? Okay, good. Records management, archivist. Yeah, it's oh boy. Yeah, everybody does it differently, right? So at MIT we have the MIT archives that do. I don't know much about it. They're very separate from the libraries in a way because they are, they're doing archives and then some records management. But you're asking about best practices, and I'm thinking, and of this sort of the change, right, that requires new skills. And we did just hire 2 people to be sort of next generation, I would say, archivists in a way. We had a digital archivist of some kind, and then a higher up person, sort of head of preservation and something, but sort of a vague title, but will essentially be, bringing us forward. She's Nancy McGovern, who's formerly at ICPSR. And so, so as for best practices, I feel like, based on talks that I've seen that Nancy's given, that there are some, like, sort of documents and that sort of thing out there for archives and records management to sort of guide people, but I don't know how, because I'm not in archives, I don't use them, but I could talk to you about this afterwards and sort of point you in the right direction at least. So, I don't know if that helps.
Great.
So, what do you do if you're not big? So, we have a small library staff. We have smaller scale research. We still do a lot of research. But
and this is a plug, I have a job opening. I actually have 3, so come and see me. We don't have digital initiatives department. We don't even have a digital initiatives person. That's one of the jobs that's going to be open. So anything that we do is kind of on top of regular work. So I'm sure there are others of us who don't, you announced the next ARL thing. We're not ARL. We're not even like close to ARL. So I just wonder if there are other kinds of things that you heard of for the smaller scale. We still have research. We have data management issues. We're building a repository, but there's 3 people who might potentially be working on this, not a team of 12 from this department, 5 from that department, and building the skill sets. So any tips for the little guy?
All I can say from my perspective is that before I came to MIT, which is a big university, obviously full of resources, right? I worked at Woods Hole, and Jen Walton right over there is from Woods Hole, and if you haven't met her, there she is in the stripe, right? And they are doing amazing things. Like every single time I talk to the people down there, it's like, oh, and then we implemented this, and now we're working with Elsevier, and it's like, oh my God, like, and the great thing about being small is that you don't have to get buy-in from half the library staff, right, to go forward. I mean, you're the boss, exactly. So this is a wonderful opportunity to move quickly. I mean, that's the thing. Big organizations, right, move more deliberately, which has its advantages. But small organizations like Woods Hole, I mean, stuff is coming out all the time. So I would say talk to Jen and find out what they're doing right, because they're doing something right. And that is probably, I mean, just use that to your advantage, I guess.
And then what I would say is 2 things. First, I know for the first institute, it was all ARL. They may be opening up. It's worth checking to see if they're limiting it to ARL, because there were 75 people the first time, and how many ARL institutions are there? I wouldn't be surprised if they were opening it up, but I don't really know. And then the other thing is small people collaborate. There's a lot of you got other major institutions in Worcester, and libraries have a history of collaborating with each other. Here's a great issue to form a collaborative group on, and pool your resources, pool your staff, and make it happen that way. But you already knew that.
And I would say, you can certainly ask any one of us, boot campers, because we're all on different stages on that road. So somebody will have an answer for you.
And even at big institutions, so we have a few people on the team. We don't have a big setup. You'd think with the size library we have that we would, but we don't, because we just don't have that many people who have the background and training for this. So just try and make really good use of who you have.
I'm sorry we're out of time. We're just running late, and I want to thank the panelists.